I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I believe that if a study were done on facial expressions made during a word association test, the results would show that most people's facial expression, given the word taxes, would be strikingly similar to that as when they were asked to recall the last time that they stumped their toe or they smashed their finger with a hammer. Just as each physical injury has left a memory of pain and discomfort, so has each tax season burned a memory of stress and anger into the minds of most Americans. As many of you may know, I am an original intent constitutionalist. I believe the federal government was not established to tax and spend. It was established to protect freedom and liberty. Yet here we are today trying to solve our nation's economic woes through an outdated and failed philosophy of more taxes, more spending, more borrowing, an overall belief that more government is the solution. How many times, Mr. Speaker, will we hit ourselves in the thumb with an economic hammer before we realize that this is not the way to approach our problems? As the great Winston Churchill once said, quote, "For a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle," unquote. With the tax filing deadline just around the corner and many Georgia families struggling to figure out how they'll pay off Uncle Sam this year, now is the time to do away with our terrible tax system, scrap this tax and spend mentality so we can go about a better way to get this country back on track. Mr. Speaker, I would submit that one great way to reform our tax system would be to institute the fair tax, which I'm an ardent supporter. A system that would replace all federal taxes with one single retail sales tax. Just imagine the money that would flow into our economy if hardworking Americans were actually allowed to keep more of their money that they earned. If they didn't see increasing amounts being taken by a government that can't even pass a balanced budget, much less operate on one. However, it would be foolish to only discuss reforming our tax system without addressing its soulmate, and that is government spending. Skyrocketing growth in government spending by both Congress and presidents, regardless of political party, has grown to a level of astronomical proportions. Spending by the federal government has more than doubled since 1980 and tripled since 1965. Recent history has shown us that cutting taxes is not a viable solution if we do not also address our gluttonous spending. This government exists for the sole purpose of serving the people. But for too many years, government has been merely serving itself. It has taxed and spent itself into a debt that shows no signs of receding. You see, this is something that seems to have been forgotten by Congress and by this administration. To spend these huge increases as they are proposing, they must first take it away from people through taxes. And what happens when there are not enough taxes to cover all the increased spending? They simply increase taxes, often through new and creative methods, while also increasing our federal debt. In 1930, the U.S. tax code was a brisk 500 pages long. Today, it has swollen to more than 45,000 pages, full of provisions that too often produce negative results. A fair tax system, empowering the American people to decide how much taxes they will pay through their own purchasing decisions, will force this spending-engorged government to change their ways and enact fiscally responsible budgets. In addition, a fair tax system will move the responsibility of taxing citizens back to the states, simplify the process, and remove the temptation by Congress and the administration to feed their growing appetites at a smorgasbord that is our current tax system. Often when I'm at home talking with my constituents in Georgia about taxes, I tell them if 10% is good enough for the Lord, it ought to be good enough for Uncle Sam. We have to reduce the size of government and government spending to achieve this heavenly goal. Under the original intent of our Constitution, 10% would be more than enough to fund all of the functions of the federal government as envisioned by our founders. I call on my colleagues to listen to the American people who are demanding a better system. We can and should give it to them by reducing federal government spending and reforming our tax system by enacting the fair tax. I yield back, and I congratulate my dear colleague from Iowa for allowing me to speak and bringing this very important issue to the forefront of the American people. We have to stop spending. We're spending too much, we're taxing too much, we're borrowing too much, and it's going to kill our economy. I call this a steamroller of socialism being shoved down the throats of the American people that's going to strangle our economy. It's going to slay the American people economically if we don't stop it. And I yield back. Thank you so much.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia for coming down and joining in this discussion, Mr. Speaker, and I am hopeful that we will have many more like this. I want to reiterate a point that I made at the conclusion of Mr. Linder's delivery, and that is, as he went down through the list of all the taxes that get eliminated, corporate and personal income tax, and payroll tax, and inheritance tax, and the list goes on and on and on. And it provides an incentive, the fair tax provides an incentive for earnings, savings, and investment. Here's my point, and I want to make this clear, and I'll stand on it, and I'll defend it, and I've made this statement across this country, and it's this: the fair tax does everything good that anybody's tax proposal does that is good for our economy and the American people. It does all of them, and it does them all better. Now that sounds like a real big position to take, and I'm taking it because I'm solid in that.